Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel now. I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case, right? Let's get comfy and relax, and let's begin. The man who erased himself on the morning of September 12, 2024. A young woman named Amelia Hayes walked into the City of London police station, her expression a mixture of anxiety and apology. She was there to report her fiancé, Liam Archer, as missing. The story began the night before. Liam, a quiet software engineer for a fintech giant, had told her he was going for a late-night walk to clear his head after a stressful week at work. He'd kissed her cheek, left his wallet and keys on the hall table, and stepped out into the drizzly London night. He never came back. From the police's perspective, this was hardly a crisis. An adult male, gone for less than 12 hours. He's probably at a mate's place. Phone died. You know how it is, a desk sergeant offered, trying to be reassuring. Men do this sometimes. Love. They just need a bit of space. The police took a preliminary statement but made it clear that a search wouldn't be initiated yet. Amelia left, her unease deepening into a cold dread. Liam wasn't the type to need space. He was a creature of habit, a man whose life ran on a precise, predictable schedule. As ours turned into a full day, then two, her frantic calls to his friends and family yielded nothing. On the morning of September 15th, a visibly distraught Amelia returned to the station, and this time, the police listened. The official investigation into the disappearance of Liam Archer began. Detectives were immediately struck by the sheer lack of evidence. Liam's apartment, which he shared with Amelia, was pristine. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. His laptop was on his desk, powered down. His car was untouched in the building's garage. His digital footprint, usually a constant stream of coding forums and news updates, had gone utterly cold at 9:07 p.m. on the night he vanished. He had simply ceased to exist. The investigation pivoted to his employer, a powerful data security firm called Omnicore. Detectives Harding and Chen interviewed Liam's superior, a severe, impeccably dressed man named Alistair Finch. Finch explained that Liam was a brilliant but solitary engineer, a key player on a top-secret project codenamed Janus. The project involved a revolutionary new predictive algorithm designed to forecast market fluctuations. Liam was under immense pressure, Finch stated, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the polished boardroom table. The work was demanding. He suggested the possibility that Liam might have sold the proprietary code to a rival and fled. It was a plausible motive that would explain the clean disappearance. This theory sent Harding and Chen down a rabbit hole of corporate espionage, interviewing rival firms and poring over Omnicore security logs. But every lead was a dead end. No one had approached Liam, and no data breaches had been detected. The case grew colder, the silence around Liam Archer more profound. The detectives dug into Liam's personal life, but it was a shallow well. He was an orphan, raised in the care system, with no known family. His life seemed to begin the day he met Amelia 5 years prior. Their friends described them as the perfect couple, devoted and inseparable. Yet, Detective Harding, a veteran with a keen sense for the things people don't say, felt a nagging dissonance. Amelia's grief seemed genuine, but her stories about Liam felt rehearsed, lacking the specific, messy details of a shared life. The first crack in the mystery came from the financial forensics team. They found a small, recurring encrypted payment, leaving Liam's account on the first of every month, sent to an untraceable digital wallet. It wasn't a large sum, but its regularity suggested something clandestine: blackmail, payment for an illicit service. Frustrated, Harding circled back to Alistair Finch at Omnicore, pressing him harder on the nature of Project Janus. This time Finch's composure fractured. He admitted the project was more than a market predictor. It wasn't about stocks. He confessed, his voice dropping to a whisper. It was about people. Janus wasn't designed to predict the market. It was designed to predict human behavior. We fed it colossal amounts of public data, social media, traffic patterns, consumer habits. Liam's algorithm could forecast an individual's future actions, with a terrifying 92% accuracy. The project was shut down by the board. It was deemed too dangerous, too open to misuse. This revelation reframed everything. Liam wasn't just a coder. He was the architect of a digital oracle. Had he used it on someone? Had he seen something he shouldn't have? The investigation had no answers, and the trail was now ice cold. Harding's gut feeling about Amelia, however, remained. He put a quiet surveillance team on her. For weeks, she did nothing but go to work, come home, and grieve. Then, one Tuesday night, she broke her routine. She drove to a quiet, working-class suburb in Essex, far from her polished city life. She parked and entered a small, unassuming terraced house. She stayed for exactly 1 hour before driving home. The next morning, Harding and Chen paid a visit. To the house, an elderly woman with kind, tired eyes answered the door. Harding showed her a photo of Liam Archer. The woman's hand flew to her mouth, and tears welled in her eyes. Her husband came to the door behind her. "That's our son," the old man stammered. "Our Thomas. He got mixed up with a bad crowd when he was a teenager. Hacking, other things. He disappeared 8 years ago. We thought he was dead." Liam Archer did not exist. He was a carefully constructed identity for Thomas, a runaway hacking prodigy. The monthly payments were not blackmail. They were sent to his parents, a quiet act of penance, but this only deepened the central mystery. If Liam was really Thomas, then who was Amelia? And why had she reported her fiancé missing when she clearly knew his real identity was a secret? Harding brought Amelia Hayes back to the station. This time, the polite fiction between them was gone. Faced with the photo of Thomas's parents, her perfect composure finally shattered. The story she told was more incredible than any theory the police had concocted. She wasn't a civilian. She was an agent with MI6. 8 years ago, the agency had tracked down Thomas, a brilliant but reckless hacker, and made him an offer. A life sentence for his cybercrimes, or a new life working for them. He chose the latter. They gave him the identity of Liam Archer, a clean slate, and put him to work at Omnicore Front Company to build the Janus algorithm. Amelia's job was to be his handler, his partner, his fiancée. She was there to provide the stability and semblance of a normal life that would keep their prized asset focused and productive. The relationship had been a lie, a meticulously managed operation. So why report him missing? Harding demanded. If this was an agency operation, why involve us? Amelia's confession came in a flood of tears. "Because Liam is gone," she cried. "The operation is over." She explained that 2 weeks before he vanished, Liam had done the one thing he was forbidden to do. He ran the Janus algorithm on himself. He wanted to see his own future. The result was catastrophic. The algorithm predicted, with 98.4% accuracy, that within 6 months, his work on Janus would be discovered by the very same criminal hacking syndicate he had escaped from as a teenager. They wouldn't recruit him, they would execute him for being a government asset. But the algorithm also presented an alternative. It ran millions of simulations and found one outlier, one scenario with a high probability of survival, a complete untraceable disappearance. If he vanished so perfectly that even the government believed he was dead or had been taken, the hunt would eventually stop. His disappearance was not a crime, it was a computation. The late-night walk, leaving his wallet and keys behind, the digital silence, it was all a sequence of events calculated by his own creation to maximize his chances of survival. Amelia's report to the police was the final, crucial step, to create an official public record of a mystery that would never be solved, cementing the illusion for all parties. He hadn't been kidnapped or murdered. He had simply followed the math he had erased himself to live. The case of Liam Archer was officially closed and moved to the cold case files. Harding stood looking at the photo of the smiling man who never was, knowing the truth could never be written in any report. The victim wasn't a victim, the crime wasn't a crime, and the perpetrator was an algorithm designed by the ghost who now haunted their files. The collector of Glencallucan, the remote, mist-shrouded village of Glencalluc, Scotland. Late one autumn night, the emergency dispatcher received a frantic call. On the other end of the line, a young woman's trembling voice reported, that her husband, the wealthy recluse Richard Blackwood, had suffered a catastrophic fall down the main staircase of their Gothic manor. She pleaded for help, her voice cracking with hysteria. The address given was Blackwood Manor, a sprawling stone edifice that loomed over the village like a sleeping beast. Within 10 minutes, an ambulance snaked its way up the winding private road. The paramedics, upon entering the house, were met with a scene of unsettling quiet. The grand hall was filled with antique dolls and automatons, their glass eyes seeming to follow the paramedics' every move. At the foot of the magnificent oak staircase lay the body of Richard Blackwood, a man of 53. His much younger wife, Isabella, a striking woman of 27, was weeping beside him. After a brief examination, the paramedics determined Richard was already gone. However, during the procedural checks, the lead medic, a sharp-eyed woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, made a startling discovery. Lifting the victim's silk shirt, she found deep symmetrical bruising on his wrists and ankles, inconsistent with a tumble down the stairs. The body was also strangely cold, far colder than the ambient temperature of the house would suggest. The official cause of death might be pending, but Dr. Thorne's instincts screamed foul play. Sensing a sinister story behind the panicked call, she immediately reported her suspicions to the police upon returning to the station. The report landed on the desk of Detective Chief Inspector Alistair Finch, a seasoned officer from Inverness, summoned to handle the high-profile death. Entering the oppressive silence of Blackwood Manor, Finch found the body had already been prepared for the undertakers by a strangely efficient Isabella. This haste immediately struck Finch as a red flag. What was she trying to hide? He ordered the undertakers to leave and had the body sent directly for a full autopsy. At the scene, besides the grieving widow, were 2 other individuals: a young, intense local artisan named Ewan, aged 22, and his girlfriend, Chloe, aged 21. Strangely, Chloe was sobbing with a violent hysterical grief that seemed to eclipse even that of the new widow. When questioned about their relationship with the deceased, both Ewan and Chloe remained silent, their eyes darting nervously towards Isabella. What was the connection between this wealthy middle-aged man, his young wife, and this local couple, all present in the manor on the night of his death? To uncover the truth, Finch took all 3 to the station for questioning. That evening, the autopsy results came back, and they were chilling. Richard Blackwood had not died from a fall. The cause of death was a massive overdose of a powerful, fast-acting sedative, compounded by severe hypothermia. The bruises on his wrists and ankles were ligature marks. He had been tied down, drugged, and left to freeze to death. The fall was a clumsy, staged cover-up. What had driven the young wife to conceal the true, horrific cause of her husband's death? And what role did the 2 young locals play in this macabre theater? At the station, it was Ewan who broke first. He confessed to killing Richard, but insisted it was an accident. He claimed he had been at the manor to work on restoring a complex 18th century automaton for Richard's collection. He alleged that he had walked in on Richard making aggressive, lecherous advances on Chloe, who had accompanied him. In a protective rage, Ewan claimed he shoved Richard, who stumbled backward and tragically fell down the stairs. He maintained he never expected the old man to be so frail. Chloe corroborated his story, her tearful account painting Richard as a predator who used his collection as a lure. To prove their story, they produced a handwritten note, signed by Richard. It read, "I acted inappropriately towards a young woman in my home. I accept full responsibility for my disgraceful actions." After investigation, forensics confirmed the handwriting and signature were indeed Richard's. However, Finch wasn't convinced he had written it voluntarily. There was another glaring inconsistency: Isabella's role. She claimed Ewan had called her in a panic after Richard's accidental death. But phone records showed Isabella had called Ewan's phone multiple times in the hour before the estimated time of death. When confronted with this, Isabella's story shifted. Through a flood of tears, she told a tragic tale of a nightmarish marriage. She claimed Richard, her husband of just 2 years, was a monster. He was pathologically controlling, a violent abuser who treated her like another one of his prized possessions. She recounted discovering flirtatious texts and evidence of affairs, which, when confronted, had resulted in brutal physical violence. She said she was a prisoner in the gilded cage of Blackwood Manor and had been planning her escape, according to her new testimony. She had been there that night to confront Richard and demand a divorce. Ewan and Chloe were there as moral support. When Richard became violent, Ewan had intervened, leading to the tragic fall. Her initial lie about the heart attack was born of panic, a desperate attempt to protect the young man who had tried to save her. Her story was compelling, but it still felt incomplete to Finch. The sheer cruelty of the real cause of death, being drugged and left to freeze, spoke of a cold-blooded premeditation that didn't fit a simple confrontation gone wrong. He decided to turn the investigations focus back to the manor itself. There was a particular room in the West Wing that Isabella had claimed was unsafe due to structural issues. The door was sealed with a heavy, modern padlock. Finch, armed with a warrant, had the lock cut. The air that billowed out was stale and chemical. The room wasn't structurally unsound. It was a workshop. It contained medical-grade preservation chemicals, surgical tools, and glass tanks. And along the far wall stood Richard's most prized possessions. Lined up on pedestals were 5 life-sized, uncannily realistic dolls, dressed in Victorian finery. But as Finch moved his flashlight along the line, he realized one of them was not a doll. It was the perfectly preserved body of a young woman, her skin like porcelain, her eyes replaced with glass replicas, her limbs posed artfully. Richard Blackwood wasn't just a collector of automatons. He was a serial killer who collected people. Hidden in a safe in the workshop, they found his journals. In meticulous looping script, Richard detailed his horrific hobby, his methods of sedating and preserving his victims, whom he saw as his masterpieces. The final entries were the most chilling. He wrote about Isabella, his living doll, and his growing obsession with making her a permanent part of his collection. He was planning to kill her next. Faced with this discovery, the trio's final story emerged. Isabella confessed she had found the journals a month ago. She knew she was living with a monster and was his next intended victim. Terrified that the police wouldn't believe her against her powerful husband, she concocted a desperate plan for survival. She sought out Ewan, a local artisan from a family of taxidermists, known for his unique skill in preservation arts. Chloe was his devoted girlfriend, who agreed to help. The initial plan, she claimed, was to drug Richard, restrain him and force him to sign a confession before turning him over to the police. But Richard was stronger than they anticipated. He fought back viciously. In the ensuing struggle, they were forced to use a much larger dose of the sedative. When they realized he was dying, they panicked and staged the fall down the stairs, concocting their web of lies to cover up what they had done. It was a case of self-defense, a preemptive strike against a monster. It seemed the case was finally solved. A dark, tragic, but understandable sequence of events. The Crown Prosecution Service would likely pursue manslaughter charges, but with the revelation of Richard's secret, a jury would be deeply sympathetic. But one detail gnawed at DCI Finch: the preserved body in the workshop whom they identified as a missing tourist from the previous year had an autopsy report. The cause of death was identical to Richard's, a massive overdose of the same rare sedative, followed by rapid freezing. It was a highly specific, almost signature, method. On a hunch, Finch dug deeper into Ewan and Chloe's lives. He discovered that the missing tourist had last been seen leaving a village pub with the young couple. He found traces of the same sedative and a batch of chemicals seized from Ewan's family workshop. He brought Ewan in one last time, laying out the evidence that linked him not only to Richard's death, but to the tourists as well. This time, the real truth, a truth more horrifying than anything Finch could have imagined, finally spilled out. Ewan and Chloe were the real predators. They had murdered the tourist a year prior, a thrill kill they had meticulously planned, using their family's expertise to preserve the body, which they hid. When Isabella, having discovered her husband's violent fantasies in his journals, came to Ewan for help, she didn't just find an artisan, she found a fellow monster. Isabella recognized the opportunity immediately. She didn't want to just escape Richard. She wanted his fortune, and she wanted to give her new accomplices a perfect alibi for their past crime. Together, the three of them devised the final macabre plan. They would murder Richard using Ewan and Chloe's signature method. Then, they would move the tourist's body from its hiding place into Richard's secret workshop. They would discover it and present Richard to the world as the serial killer, the Glen Calliot collector. He would become the perfect scapegoat for a murder he didn't commit, and his dark fantasies, detailed in his own journals, would be the proof. Richard Blackwood was a would-be monster, a man who dreamed of killing but had never taken a life. The journals were nothing but sick fantasy. The body in his workshop was not his victim. It was the victim of his wife and her young accomplices, planted there to frame a dead man. A man dreaming of becoming a killer was murdered by those who already were. Story 3. The Murder of Ghislaine Marchall. The case I'm about to share with you is one that has stirred significant controversy. Public opinion on whether the suspect is guilty or not is split into two camps, with neither side able to persuade the other. It's similar to the famous O.J. Simpson case you've probably heard about. Although this story is a bit lengthy, its unfolding is incredibly thrilling and captivating. Each of us may find our own answer in the details. The story takes place in a small town in the south of France, a beautiful place called Mugan, located about 4 miles from the city of Cannes. This town sits on a hillside, and on a smaller hill to the west lies a luxurious 3-story villa with elegant white-gray walls contrasting with red roof tiles. The crime occurred here in a spot that truly exemplifies a high-quality lifestyle, reserved for the elite. The villa's owner, Ghislaine Marchall, is 65 years old. After her husband passed away, she inherited a substantial fortune and enjoyed a comfortable life. She has a son who works far away and rarely comes home. She had been living alone in this luxurious villa for nearly 4 years, relishing the serenity of her retirement. However, following a recent event, her family has garnered national attention. On the evening of Monday, June 24, 1991, the Mugan police received a distress call. The caller, a woman named Erica, reported that her close friend Gan had been missing since the previous day, with no trace found at her residence. Deeply worried that something terrible might have happened, she asked for police assistance in the search. Upon receiving the report, the police quickly headed to Gettel's villa to assess the situation. This was a luxurious villa on the western side of town. 3 people were waiting for the police. Upon arrival, the caller, Erica, along with Colette and Pascal, all close friends of Ghislaine. Erica explained to the officers that she and Ghislaine were very close, often sharing afternoon tea together. The previous day, Sunday, at 11:48 a.m., they had spoken on the phone. Gan had just finished bathing and invited Erica over for lunch the next day. Erica happily accepted, but Gan mentioned she was busy cooking for an upcoming guest, so they only chatted briefly before ending the call. The conversation lasted just 2 minutes. Erica continued explaining that at 11:30 a.m. this morning she arrived at Gan's house as planned and rang the doorbell, but no one answered. She tried calling the house phone, but there was still no response. This was very unusual. Gan never canceled plans without informing her, even in case of an emergency. Erica began to feel uneasy around this time. Colette also arrived, mentioning that she and her husband had been invited for lunch at Ghislaine's house the previous day at 1:30 p.m., but when they arrived, no one was home, and there was no answer to their calls. They left after waiting a bit, since they had other obligations that afternoon. Later, around 6 p.m., Colette grew more concerned and drove alone to Ghislaine's house again. She rang the bell, but still received no response. She waited for a while, thinking Gan might have had an urgent errand, but after staying until it was dark, with no sign of her friend, she decided to return today to check again and happened to meet Erica. The two discussed the situation and then climbed over the gate to get into the yard. They pressed their faces against the villa windows to look inside, but couldn't see anything unusual. Since Gan lived alone and was elderly, they worried that she might have had an accident in the house, like a fall with no one around to help. Thinking this, they contacted a mutual friend named Pascal, who managed a security company. After learning of the situation, Pascal arrived with a security officer. Together they managed to unlock the main door of Ghislaine's house. They found the key still in the lock on the inside of the door. Once inside, everything was pitch dark. All the windows were locked, and the home security system had not been activated. A breakfast tray remained on the kitchen counter, showing no sign of an intruder. Next, they went to Gan's bedroom where the curtains were drawn open and the bed was unmade with a pair of glasses and a newspaper on it, as if Ghislaine had just gotten up. However, despite searching everywhere in the house, they could not find any trace of her. Shortly afterward, Gan's private doctor, a 74-year-old, arrived and joined the search. They thoroughly checked the entire villa and found some jewelry and an open handbag in the bedroom closet, but there was no cash inside. Aside from this, they found nothing more. In this urgent situation, America called the police for assistance. The missing person, Ghislaine, aged 65, was born into a wealthy French family and had one sister. She led a privileged life from an early age and received an excellent education. Her father was a businessman who managed multiple enterprises and had participated in the resistance movement during World War II, ultimately passing away in exile as an adult. Gan married and had one son, though her marriage was not a happy one. She divorced her first husband and raised her son alone. In her youth, Gan was beautiful and had no shortage of admirers. She later met her husband, a successful businessman who ran a well-known automotive equipment company. After marrying, they lived happily and comfortably. However, their happiness was short-lived, as her second husband passed away from a severe illness, leaving Gan deeply heartbroken. She had no further romantic relationships after that. After inheriting her husband's wealth, Gan became a wealthy single mother. She then took her son to Switzerland, where they lived for a time. Once her son reached adulthood and began living independently, Gan returned to France, where she built a villa in the town of Mugen, and has lived alone there ever since. The police thoroughly searched the main building, but found nothing of note. Upon stepping outside, they noticed a small guest house nearby and asked the homeowner's friends if they had checked it. The friends mentioned that there was a basement under the guest house, but they had never been inside and didn't know what it contained. Hearing this, the police decided to investigate the basement. They followed an exterior staircase down to the basement where they encountered a metal door. They attempted to push it open, but it was locked. Deciding to break the lock, they eventually managed to unlock it, but oddly the door wouldn't fully open and could only be pushed open a small amount. The police realized something was blocking the door from the inside. After another attempt, they managed to widen the opening slightly, but they still couldn't see what was beyond. One officer reached through the gap and felt a folding bed positioned just behind the door, with the bed's frame obstructing the door from opening. The officer attempted to move the bed but couldn't budge it. Additionally, there was a metal pipe and a wooden plank wedged tightly in the corner between the metal door and bed, blocking the door's movement. The officer reached through again, trying to kick the metal pipe and wooden plank loose, but they were wedged firmly. During this effort, deep scratch marks were left on the floor. Fortunately, they were eventually able to dislodge the obstructions. The officer then lifted one end of the folding bed, gradually pushing it upright while opening the door. After some time, the basement door was finally opened. Inside, it was pitch black, and the air was heavy with a musty smell. Feeling around, an officer found the light switch and turned it on. A hallway stretched out before them, with a wine cellar on the eastern side. Walking down the hallway, they reached a spacious room. Inside, 8 old plastic containers were lining up, filled with crushed stones. The room also contained a handcart and various miscellaneous items. Nearby, they quickly spotted a set of dentures lying beside the plastic containers. On the floor were 2 paper bags and a pair of large rounded scissors. The atmosphere gave everyone a sense of foreboding. A few officers continued deeper into the basement and found a boiler room with its door ajar. Upon entering, they were met with a scene that stunned everyone present. Ghislaine, the 65-year-old homeowner, lay face down on the floor near the boiler. Her arms raised above her head with her hands together and her legs slightly apart. She wore only a black and white striped bathrobe, which was pulled up above her waist, stained with blood. Her right foot was in a slipper, while the left slipper lay nearby. The entire scene was deeply unsettling and sent chills through those who witnessed it. Based on the scene, the metal door was the only entrance to the basement. When the police arrived, the door was locked with a folding bed blocking it from behind, preventing anyone inside from escaping. The entire basement had effectively become a sealed room. Upon hearing the news from the police, Gan's longtime friends broke down in tears. They described her as a gentle person with no enemies, respected by everyone around her. It was unimaginable to them that she could encounter such a horrifying incident in her own home. Forensic examiners arrived on the scene one by one to carry out their work. The police conducted a thorough investigation of the basement and soon discovered something unbelievable. On the white wooden door leading to the wine cellar, there was clearly written, "Omar Matu," translated as, "Omar killed me." The chilling part was that the letters were tilted neat and legibly written, about 3 feet off the ground. There were also blood smears at the bottom of the wooden door near the floor. Similar letters were found on the boiler room door, though much fainter and difficult to decipher compared to the writing on the wine cellar door. Technical specialists analyzed each letter and its CEDA phrase, albeit incomplete, which seemed to connect with the writing on the wine cell door, suggesting some kind of link. Although the letters were handwritten, the fingers slid quickly while writing, making it impossible to extract fingerprints. This meant there was no way to prove whether Gan had written it herself, or if someone else had. The victim's hands were covered with bruises, her finger joints were fractured, and the middle finger on her left hand was nearly torn. From the scene, it appeared that someone named Omar was involved in all of this. Through their investigation, the police found that Omar was no stranger, but in fact Gan's gardener, a 29-year-old Moroccan national. Gan's friend Erica informed the police that Omar was a straightforward, honest person who had worked for Gan for a long time. He was hardworking and trustworthy, and Gan had a great deal of confidence in him. Erica recalled that whenever she visited Gan's home, she would often see Omar, who despite being a manual laborer was always neatly dressed and presented himself with the appearance of a gentleman, leaving a good impression on her. She found it hard to believe that someone so diligent and respectable could be involved in this case. The next day, the police began searching for Omar. They first went to his home, but no one was there. After speaking with neighbors, they learned that he had gone with his family to Toloni, over 60 mi away, to celebrate Eid al-Adha. This is one of the principal holidays in Islam, during which people dress in their best clothes, attend prayer services, gather for recitations, and honor deceased family members. Families with the means often host a grand feast, inviting relatives and friends. After receiving this information, the police went to Toloni and eventually located Omar, arresting him on suspicion of murder. Omar seemed unaware of the incident. Upon learning that his employer had been murdered, he appeared visibly shocked. When the police told him about the 2 phrases written in the basement, he was in disbelief and insisted that he had no idea upon what had happened, let alone that he could ever harm his employer. He asserted that the police must have arrested the wrong person. When asked if Gan might have written the messages, Omar said he couldn't tell because he couldn't read handwriting. As for the 2 phrases, he only recognized the word Omar as it was his name, and it was the only French word he knew how to write. He didn't even know the meaning of the other words. In reality, Omar was not proficient in French. He could only understand simple sentences. His wife was French, but they mostly communicated through gestures in their daily lives. After his arrest, he couldn't communicate normally with the police. They had to temporarily find a Moroccan prisoner who spoke French to help translate so they could talk with him. The suspect Omar was born in 1962 to a poor family in Morocco. His father had moved to the town of Mugan, France for work to support the family. At 23, Omar also left his homeland for Mugan, where he was finally reunited with the father he had longed to see. He found work at the home of an elderly, kind woman named Pascal. Upon learning of Omar's arrival, she immediately hired him as a gardener, providing him with a generous wage and comfortable accommodations. Omar was grateful to have found stability and worked diligently out of appreciation for her kindness. One day while out and about, Omar happened to meet a French woman. The two fell in love at first sight and later married, allowing Omar to remain in France. Pascal extended her blessings to the young couple, even helping them find an apartment and signing an open-ended work contract with Omar, assuring him that he could work for her as long as he wished. Omar was deeply appreciative of this generosity. One day, Gan visited Pascal's home and happened to see Omar working. Impressed by his skill and work ethic, she obtained Pascal's consent to also hire Omar as her gardener and his wife as a housekeeper. To make their work more convenient, Gan provided the couple with an apartment located between Escal's and her own homes, allowing Omar to manage work for both households and enjoy two sources of income. After Omar's first child was born, Pascal helped them rent a larger, more comfortable home in Lannet. Omar told the police that since he had started working in town, both of his employers had been extremely supportive and he was immensely grateful, feeling he could only repay them by working hard. To Omar, Gan was like a second mother. She adored his children, and whenever she had free time, she would visit his home to see them, treating them like her own family. Omar firmly stated that he could never and would never harm Gan, and he added that it had been a long time since he had even gone down to that basement. Although Omar consistently denied committing the crime, the writing at the scene clearly pointed to him as the culprit, and the police remained steadfast in this view. Now they needed to establish a motive and gather further evidence. The police then approached Miss Pascal to gather more information. She informed them that Omar was a good gardener, dedicated and hard. On the day of the incident, June 23rd, Omar had been working at her house all day, and she hadn't noticed any unusual behavior. However, after finishing his work that day, Omar had proactively asked her for 2 days off, explaining that he wanted to attend Eid al-Adha celebrations in Toloni with his family. He mentioned that he had already received permission from Ghislaine. Hearing this, Miss Pascal agreed to his leave. Omar left at the end of the workday that evening. The police questioned Omar's wife and father about when they had left town. Omar's wife told the police that she had taken her father-in-law and children to Toloni first, and her husband joined them there on June 24th. She confirmed that he had been with the family the entire time, never going off alone or acting out of character. She described her husband as an honest and hardworking man with no known enemies, and insisted he would never harm his employer. The police found it highly coincidental that Omar requested time off to go out of town right when the crime occurred. Moreover, when he asked Miss Pascal for leave, he had mentioned already getting Gan's permission, which raised suspicions. In theory, Omar had the opportunity to commit the crime on June 23rd while working at Miss Pascal's. He could have secretly gone to Ghislaine's house to kill her, quickly returned to work, and then left for Tone on June 24th. This could have been an attempt to create an alibi. The day after Omar's arrest, he attended an initial hearing. He insisted he had no knowledge of what had happened, even declining to seek a lawyer and remaining silent throughout. The next day, he was formally charged by the prosecutor and held in custody. In prison, Omar felt every minute was torturous. He thought he had finally secured a stable job, only to find himself inexplicably entangled in a murder case. He felt exhausted and anxious, missed his family, and wanted desperately to go home. However, whenever he tried to sit down, the guards would take away his chair. This left him feeling distressed, compounded by fear of potential violence, so he did his best to comply. For days after the crime, the forensic report revealed that the victim's head injuries resulted from being struck over 5 times with great force. There was a small wound on her neck, not fatal, likely caused by a tool resembling scissors. Her chest and abdomen bore 10 sharp force injuries. All her finger joints were broken, indicating she had fought back with her hands before dying. Additionally, there were scratches and dirt on her arms and legs, suggesting she had been dragged. While there were numerous wounds on her body, none were immediately fatal. Her cause of death was determined to be severe blood loss. The estimated time of death was between 12 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. on June 23rd. DNA tests confirmed that the blood indentures found in the basement belonged to Gan, due to technological limitations at the time. No other DNA was detected at the scene. Based on the forensic report, the police believed the killer was highly determined to end Gan's life. However, the actions appeared somewhat clumsy, suggesting it may have been the killer's first crime. The perpetrators seemed to harbor a deep hatred toward the victim, yet there was a contradiction. Gan had been kind to Omar, and no motive for him to commit the crime could be found. Furthermore, from noon to 1:30 p.m. on June 23rd, Omar was working at his other employer. Miss Pascal's leaving him. No time to commit the crime. Miss Pascal also confirmed this. If the real killer wasn't Omar, then why was his name mentioned in the basement? Throughout the basement, only Gan's DNA was found. The only entry point was the locked metal door with a bed blocking it, forming a sealed room. It seemed there was only one possibility, that Gan wrote the killer's name in her final moments. On the other hand, if the writing was done by the killer, it couldn't have been Omar, as he wouldn't incriminate himself. Perhaps the true culprit intended to frame Omar through this message, or it could be that someone else named Omar was involved, since the writing didn't include a last name, which might suggest a coincidence. However, this was merely police speculation, with no actual evidence to support it. During the investigation, one officer offered a different perspective. He argued that the writing couldn't have been done by Gan herself, as someone gravely injured, in near death, enduring excruciating pain, would hardly be able to write such clear messages. Additionally, one of the lines of text appeared quite neat, a difficult feat for a typical 65-year-old. On closer examination of the writing, they noted grammatical errors. As an educated member of the upper class, Gan was unlikely to make such basic mistakes. However, when the police reviewed some of Jilan's personal documents, they found that she often made grammatical errors, especially confusing past and indefinite tenses. It appeared that she had a habit of making such mistakes. Therefore, the possibility that she had written the messages couldn't be ruled out solely based on grammar. A month after the crime, a police handwriting expert compared the letters with Jilan's writing in other documents. The results suggested that the 2 lines in the basement were indeed written by Jilan. The expert concluded that clearer line had been written while Jilan was kneeling, and the fainter line was written while she was lying on the ground. This indicated that by the time she wrote the second line, she had weakened significantly, leaving the message incomplete. Although the handwriting expert believed the messages were Jilan's, other experts disagreed. They pointed out that the endings of the letters found at the scene were very short, whereas in Jilan's other writings, the letter endings were consistently long, especially certain letters. Based on this, they argued the writing wasn't hers. The issue of handwriting remained contentious, and without a definitive conclusion on whether Gan had written the messages, the investigation hit a dead end. Meanwhile, news of Gan's death spread widely, with the media competing to report on the case. Such a strange crime naturally attracted intense public interest, with everyone eager to learn the truth. The pressure on the police to solve the case was mounting. They revisited the scene multiple times in search of clues, with only a single metal door providing access to the basement. It seemed that placing the folding bed, metal pipe, and wooden plank to block the door could only have been done by someone inside the basement. They speculated that Gan might have suffered from some form of illness, and during a moment of instability, she could have acted wildly in the basement. She might then have managed to shut the metal door using the folding bed, metal pipe, and wooden plank to prevent anyone from entering. In a state of mental confusion, she could have written those strange messages. On the day of the crime, Gan had invited friends over for a meal. Given Omar's role as the gardener, he naturally would have known his employer's schedule. Choosing to act at such a time wouldn't have been a smart choice, as it would significantly increase the difficulty of committing the crime. When Gan was found with extensive bloodstains on her, if Omar had truly been the culprit, he would likely have had blood on him as well. Yet outside the basement, no blood was found in any other area, nor were there any footprints, not even on the stairs leading to the ground floor. This led to the possibility that Gan herself had staged the entire scene. However, this theory was quickly dismissed by Gan's family and friends. They described her as a cheerful person with a comfortable, untroubled life. She had never sought psychological help, and no psychiatric medications were found in her home. Such behavior seemed impossible. With no new leads, the investigation made no progress, prompting some reporters and private investigators to launch their own inquiries. One reporter named Levy pointed out an area in the basement that had been overlooked. The wine cellar. He noted that he had discovered a gap in the police's investigation records, which detailed every room in the basement, but did not describe the structure of the wine cellar. This suggested that the police may not have thoroughly examined that crucial area. Further research by Levy uncovered that in 1989, 2 years before the crime, Gan had hired a contractor to install a ventilation system for the wine cellar. Then, 1 year before the incident, she had 2 windows added to improve airflow in the cellar. Levy also highlighted that the swimming pool's filtration system was located in the basement. Given that Ghislaine had been wearing a bathrobe and slippers, it seemed She had just finished bathing and was likely heading to the basement to turn on the pool's filtration system in preparation for her friends who might want to swim later. Tragically, she was murdered at that moment. Thus, the entire situation could not have been self-inflicted. The killer, after murdering her, created a sealed room by blocking the door and escaped through a wine cellar window, an oversight that the police had yet to discover. These statements caused a public uproar. Many people felt that what he said made sense and supported his viewpoint. However, others argued that his claims were based on unverified clues. Installing a ventilation system in a basement is quite common, but adding windows seemed unusual. If Levy's reasoning was correct, the prime suspect would still be Omar, as Ghislaine's gardener, who was well acquainted with the basement layout. So could the killer be Omar? According to Omar's own account, on the day of the incident, June 23rd, he worked at Miss Pascal's home in the morning. At noon, he rode his motorcycle from her home to his own residence in La Canais for lunch. On his way home at 12:05 p.m., he stopped by a bakery in Mugen to buy some bread. At the time, there was only one employee in the bakery. After purchasing the bread, he continued his ride home. Around 12:15 to 12:20 p.m., he arrived at his doorstep and ran into a casino owner with whom he exchanged a few words before parting ways. By 12:40, after finishing lunch, he left home again to return to work at Miss Pascal's, arriving there around 1:30 p.m. He worked until evening, and then on his way home, stopped at a public phone booth to call his wife, who had gone ahead to tone informing her he would meet them the next day. After the call, he went home to rest. Following Omar's description, the police went to the bakery to verify his claim. The owner checked the work log for June 23rd and found that there was more than one employee working that afternoon. When questioned, the employees who were present that day all reported not seeing Omar. This raised the possibility that Omar had lied and hadn't visited the bakery that day. Next, the police interviewed the casino owner Omar had mentioned. According to his account, on the afternoon of June 23rd, he had been walking with his wife when he met a friend and invited him to lunch. They then went to a store to buy groceries. Between 12:15 and 12:25 p.m., they finished shopping and went home. The casino owner stated he couldn't recall whether he had encountered Omar, as he usually didn't pay close attention to familiar faces. The police noted that Omar's account didn't mention the casino owner's wife, and the owner himself couldn't remember meeting Omar, suggesting that Omar might have fabricated this part of his story. Upon checking Omar's phone records, the police discovered that the call to his wife had been made at 12:51 p.m. on the day of the crime, which didn't align with the timeline he had given. Without a solid alibi for that day, and with sufficient opportunity to commit the crime, Omar remained the prime suspect in the case. Omar argued that he never expected to be accused of murder. Had he known he would be in such a predicament, he would certainly have paid closer attention to every detail of that day. 4 months after the crime, police conducted tests on the clothes and shoes Omar wore on June 23rd, along with the large pair of scissors found at the scene. Results showed that Omar's shoes did not have dust particles from the basement, but traces of plaster and fiberglass were found on his pants. Additionally, animal DNA was detected on the scissors. The police speculated that the worn soles of Omar's shoes had become smooth and therefore didn't retain dust, while the plaster and fiberglass on his pants could have come from the basement where the crime took place. Moreover, the animal DNA on the scissors was broad enough in scope not to rule out the possibility it could be human. However, some experts pointed out that the chemical composition of the plaster and fiberglass didn't match anything in the basement, where no items containing plaster were found and fiberglass could be encountered in other environments. Therefore, these findings alone were insufficient to conclude that Omar had been in the basement. By November 1991, Omar had been in prison for 5 months. He began a hunger strike to protest, demanding his innocence and release, but no one seemed to care. One night, Omar did something shocking. He set his prison blanket on fire. Fortunately, a guard discovered it in time, preventing a larger blaze. After a month without food, Omar had grown very weak. Concerned he might die, the police transferred him to a hospital for treatment and allowed his family to visit. During the visit, Omar broke down in tears, finally releasing his pent-up emotions. With his family's encouragement, he eventually resumed eating. A few days later, Pascal led a group to meet with the police, including her daughter Suni. Their household mate, they all expressed their belief that Omar was innocent, describing him as a gentle man who wouldn't harm even an ant, let alone kill Gan. They vowed to help him find a lawyer, hoping to clear his name soon. Additionally, Miss Pascal shared a shocking piece of information with the police. On the night of the incident, she had received an anonymous phone call. The caller, a man with a deep voice, said, "Your gardener has caused big trouble." He used his own blood to write that message. Miss Pascal had initially found the call perplexing, thinking it might be a cruel prank. But after Gan's murder and Omar being identified as the prime suspect, she began to feel that something was off. She now felt certain that the voice on the phone wasn't Omar's. The police were skeptical of Pascal's story because in their earlier detailed questioning, she hadn't mentioned the anonymous call. Now, 6 months after the crime, she was revealing this crucial detail, casting doubt on its authenticity. Miss Pascal explained that at her age, she often forgot things. When the police first questioned her, she had forgotten about the call and only recalled it later. The police conducted surveillance on the phones of Miss Pascal's and Omar's families, but found nothing unusual. Their conversations mostly revolved around how to help Omar. Although Miss Pascal's family believed in Omar's innocence, the police did not. They checked his bank records and discovered that over the past 2 years, nearly 80,000 francs, equivalent to about $992,000, had been withdrawn from Omar's account, a substantial sum for that time. As a gardener with a fixed monthly income, where had Omar acquired such a large amount of money? Omar explained that the money wasn't his, it belonged to a friend doing business in France. This friend didn't have a French bank account, so he used Omar's account. Whenever his friend traveled back to Morocco, Omar would help withdraw a portion of the funds. This explanation was confirmed by the friend. The police also learned that Omar frequently requested salary advances from his employers Miss Pascal and Ghislaine. At the beginning of the month of the crime, Omar had requested a 1,000 franc advance from Gan. A housemaid working for Ghislaine told the police that a week before the incident on June 14th, she also saw Omar requesting an advance from Ghislaine. To investigate further, the police spoke with Miss Pascal. She confirmed that in June, Omar had requested salary advances from her, twice, citing rent and money for his mother in Morocco. Miss Pascal didn't think much of it and agreed, noting that requests for advances were common as everyone had their financial struggles. The police checked Omar's bank records and found that in June he hadn't sent any money to his mother or paid rent. In June alone, he had requested 4 advances from his 2 employers. The police presented a theory: perhaps Omar became resentful if Gan refused his second advance request, which led to the crime. Notably, when Ghislaine was murdered, no cash was found in her handbag. The police questioned Omar about this, but he denied requesting an advance from Gan. However, he admitted to requesting 2 advances from Miss Pascal, and in June explaining that he intended to send money to his mother, but hadn't done so before his arrest. Omar insisted he hadn't taken any money from Gan, and would never engage in petty theft. He argued that if he were the culprit, why wouldn't he have taken the jewelry as well? Regarding the missing cash from Gan's handbag, Omar suggested it might have been the housemaid, as he recalled Gan mentioning a maid who frequently took valuable items from the home. The police were skeptical of Omar's statement. During the conversation, Omar inadvertently revealed that he had a gambling habit. The police seized on this point, probing further. Omar admitted he enjoyed gambling, but claimed he only visited the casino a few times a month, playing only games he had previously won with modest bets. However, the investigation revealed that Omar visited the casino nearly every week, contradicting his account. The police also noted Omar's experience with bar hostesses. A bar owner reported seeing Omar flirt with women in his bar. This painted a different picture of Omar, who appeared less honest than he seemed. Additionally, his previous statements contained inconsistencies that had yet to be cleared up. 6 months after the crime, public interest in the case hadn't waned. Reporters came to the prison to interview Omar. Faced with their questions, he maintained his innocence, accusing investigators of falsely implicating him and deliberately smearing his name. He felt helpless, unsure of how to prove his innocence. Many people, after reading the news, sympathized with Omar. Believing in his innocence and accusing the police of incompetence, for detaining an innocent man and pressuring him to confess. 6 months after the crime in December 1991, Omar applied for bail for the second time, but it was denied, fueling public dissatisfaction. Support for Omar grew louder, with his defense lawyer arguing that the police had wronged him and were obligated to seek justice on his behalf. 2 months later, in February 1992, Omar filed the third bail application. Despite sound arguments from his defense lawyer, the court denied it because just days before his application, police forensic experts had produced new findings revealing that dust on Omar's pants matched dust from the basement, indicating he had been there. Omar explained that 2 months before the incident, Ghislaine had bought some flower pots, and not knowing where to store them, she asked him to take them to the basement. The police didn't believe him, as he had previously stated it had been a long time since he'd been in the basement, yet he now claimed to have been there 2 months before the incident, a clear contradiction. In March 1992, a newspaper published an article claiming that due to his gambling debts, Omar had once stolen a gold necklace from his wife. According to the report, in May 1990, a man named Ridaud sold a gold necklace at a jewelry store in France. And this Ridaud could have been Omar, whose last name was Riad. The police questioned Omar about this, but he adamantly denied stealing his wife's necklace, saying it was completely unnecessary. His wife was gentle and respectful toward him, and if he truly needed money, she would have willingly helped him. He insisted it was absurd to think he would steal from her. Most importantly, in May 1990, as the article stated, he wasn't even in France. He was in Morocco, and immigration records could verify this. Therefore, the person who sold the necklace could not have been him. In March 1992, Omar filed a fourth bail application, which was again denied. Before the judge, Omar complained that he wanted to know who had baseless details to the press. He believed that the articles were deliberately trying to smear his reputation, and someone must have leaked these rumors to the reporters. During the subsequent investigation, the police identified several other suspects. These included Omar's own brother, a chef, who had a conflict with Gan, a Frenchman, and a man named Gilbert. Initially, the police thought Omar's brother, who resembled him, might have been mistaken for Omar by G-Plan. However, when they found the brother, they discovered that he didn't resemble Omar at all, had never been to France, and had remained in Morocco the entire time. He was therefore ruled out as a suspect. The chef, who had previously clashed with Ghislaine, had left his job, and at the time of the incident was working for another employer with a solid alibi, proving he wasn't at the scene, so he was also eliminated. As a suspect, the Frenchman had left France for Switzerland 2 days before the crime and didn't return until afterward, with clear travel records confirming this, so he was ruled out as well. The final suspect, Gilbert, lived in a trailer not far from Gan's home and had a poor reputation, with neighbors accusing him of petty theft. However, on the day of the crime, he wasn't in France, but was visiting relatives in Morocco, verified by his plane ticket and passport. With this, all individual suspicions were cleared. In April 1992, Omar filed a fifth bail application, but was once again denied. Frustrated, he began a hunger strike on April 16 to protest, and a few days later, he even refused water. He was quickly hospitalized after passing out. Despite his extreme protest, he received no encouraging news. 2 months later, a judge visited him in the hospital to inform him that his sentence would be extended by another year. This devastated Omar, worsening his mental and physical health. His defense lawyer questioned whether this suffering was the result of imprisoning an innocent man, arguing that no clear evidence identified Omar as the culprit, and that he shouldn't endure such treatment. After nearly a month of hunger striking, Omar realized it wasn't working and gave up. In March 1993, he was transferred to a prison in Nice, confined to a solitary cell for special prisoners, where the toilet was clogged, the walls were filthy, and the conditions were revolting. He became desperate and angry, losing all hope in life. At one point, he hid a razor blade in a piece of bread and swallowed it. He alerted the guards afterward, but initially they ignored him until he collapsed in pain. Eventually, he was taken to the hospital and survived. After his recovery, he resumed his extreme protests. Upon release from the hospital, he was transferred to a standard cell with better conditions. Omar spent 10 months in the Nice prison during this time, the police officially announced the conclusion of their investigation into Ghislaine's case. 3 years after the crime in January 1994, the trial began at the Nice local court. Defendant Omar Radad was charged with murder. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed with some supporters believing in Omar's innocence. After 9 intense days of arguments between both sides, the verdict was announced. Omar Radad was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 18 years in prison. Many around the world were disheartened by this outcome, feeling that Omar had not received a fair trial. The news sparked a wave of public outcry in France, and even caused a stir in the Moroccan community. Many believed the case lacked sufficient evidence, and that Omar was an innocent victim, leading to widespread support and demands for a retrial. Omar's defense lawyer hired a private investigator to seek evidence in his favor and encouraged him not to lose hope. 2 weeks after the verdict, in February 1994, a group of 18 lawyers issued a joint statement condemning the court for convicting Omar with insufficient evidence. Together they demanded a trial. Following this statement, the Labor Union Federation promptly released an article criticizing the group of lawyers, claiming that a few politically motivated attorneys eager for fame were publicly defaming the judicial system. A month later, a writer named Lohr published a book on the case titled Omar: The Making of a Criminal. He stated that he wrote the book in 3 weeks, driven by anger. Lohr believed that Omar was also a victim in Gann's case, caught in an elaborate setup, and hinted that there might be hidden political dealings behind the case. He also pointed out that Gann's brother-in-law was a prominent figure in the marble industry who may have influenced Gann's trial, using power and connections to tilt the scales of justice, resulting in an unfair trial for Omar. Following these statements, Gann's family promptly filed a defamation lawsuit against the author in court. The judge ruled that Lohr's claims lacked evidence and had caused emotional distress to Gann's family. Lohr was found guilty of defamation, ordered to apologize to the family, and required to pay damages. That same year, another author named Verges also published a book on the case titled Omar Matu Histoire d'un crime. In it, the author sharply criticized judicial injustice and suggested that racial discrimination was involved. In 1994, a woman living in the town of Moros happened to read this book. She voluntarily reached out to the author, claiming that on the day of the crime she saw a truck left near Ghislaine's home, with some wooden boards in the back which appeared to have bloodstains on them. She suspected that the owner of this truck could be the real killer of Ghislaine. The author Verges, along with the woman, held a press conference to publicly reveal this crucial clue. The police were compelled to investigate and discovered that the truck the woman saw belonged to a neighbor who was a painter, and regularly used the truck to transport wood and red paint. At the time of the crime, the painter had a solid alibi, so he was ruled out as a suspect. In May of that same year, an article titled The Second Omar appeared in the press. The article claimed that Gann knew another man named Omar, and the two had met at a casino before the crime occurred. Following this lead, the police did indeed locate another man named Omar who lived about 10 miles from Maro. However, verification showed that this man had no connection to Ghislaine. The article was merely a ploy to attract media attention. Meanwhile, Omar, who was incarcerated, had repeatedly appealed to the Supreme Court. A year later, the French Supreme Court declared that there had been no procedural errors during Gann's trial, and asserted that Omar's trial had been fair. In September of that year, a man released from Claro prison revealed to a Moroccan newspaper that during his time in prison, a fellow inmate named Gallon had confessed to him, claiming that he was the one who killed Ghislaine. Alan allegedly had a girlfriend who worked as a maid at Gann's home, but had been fired for poor performance. The maid, angry about her dismissal, reportedly asked Alan to take revenge on Gann. The two allegedly broke into Gann's villa intending to steal, but when they were caught, they panicked and killed her. Alan supposedly wrote Omar Matu to shift suspicion onto Omar and mislead the police. Upon receiving this statement, the police immediately questioned Alan. The results showed that on the day of the crime, Alan was in the hospital due to a motorcycle accident, and his girlfriend was also at the hospital taking care of him. Alan admitted that what he said in prison was fabricated. The police checked hospital records, confirming his alibi, and the lead once again came to a dead end. In May 1996, at the request of Morocco's King Hassan to French President Jacques Chirac, reduced Omar's sentence from 18 years to 4 years and 8 months. Additionally, a secret agreement was reached that Morocco would release a French prisoner. 7 years after the case, another article about Gan's murder suggested that Gan had previously had financial disputes with 3 Italian men who later fled to Italy. However, as this news emerged, all attention shifted to Omar's impending release. The following day, people were curious to see how the wrongly accused gardener would live after gaining his freedom. That day, crowds gathered outside the prison. As Omar walked out, cheers erupted. In an interview with reporters, Omar said he would not give up on seeking the truth, and was determined to find the real killer to clear his name. After the interview, he got into a car and left looking well, and even flashing a victory sign at the cameras before departing. In February 2000, on the 6th anniversary of Omar's conviction, the Court of Appeals, at the request of the Investigation and Review Committees, ordered a reopening of the investigation into Gilan's case, specifically the handwriting found at the scene. The task was given to 2 handwriting experts. Their findings showed that the 2 messages found in the basement were not written by the victim, Gan. In January 2001, the Court of Appeals further ordered DNA testing on items found at the scene, such as the metal pipe, wooden plank, and paper bags. A month later, results revealed the DNA of 2 men, though their identities could not be determined. This new evidence was not substantial enough to affect Omar's conviction. 11 years after the incident, Ryer L. received a mysterious call from a man claiming to be named Guy. The caller said he had once been a driver for the leader of the Solar Temple cult, of which Gan was allegedly a member. Guy stated that at 11:45 a.m. on June 23, 1991, he had driven 3 other cult members to Gan's house. The 3 individuals exited the car while he drove away, returning at 2:15 p.m. to pick them up. Guy speculated that Gan might have been killed by the cult due to financial disputes. Lore passed this information to the police, but upon investigation they found that Guy was a con artist, with no evidence to back his story. He had a criminal history with multiple convictions for blackmail and fraud. Guy's account was deemed unreliable, and likely an attempt to seek attention. After his release, Omar wrote a book about his experiences titled Pourquoi, translated to English as Why. In the book, he details his wrongful conviction and the suffering he endured. The book quickly became a phenomenon, selling very well and even being adapted into a film. Notably, in the book, Omar mentions a bakery and explains that when questioned by police, he mistakenly gave the wrong bakery's name. In reality, he frequented a different bakery but hadn't realized his mistake at the time. Many readers visited this bakery, and the staff confirmed that Omar indeed often came by around noon to buy bread. To this day, Omar continues his search for the truth. Although he received a partial pardon and now lives freely, he still cannot find peace and constantly strives to prove his innocence, tirelessly seeking ways to appeal. However, some still believe the case is not as complex as it seems, and that Omar is the one who killed Gan. Perhaps only he truly knows the real truth of this case. Story 4. The Murder of Ms. Konghyun. June 9, 2008, in Ananga City in South Korea's Gyeonggi Province, a karaoke hostess named Miss Kim was growing increasingly worried. She hadn't heard from her close friend and colleague Kong for 2 days, completely out of character for someone who worked diligently to make ends meet. Despite repeatedly calling and texting, there was no response. Concerned for her friend's safety, Miss Kim took a taxi to Kong's second-floor apartment around midnight after her shift ended. Upon arriving, she noticed dim light filtering through the curtains. Knowing her friend never slept with lights on, Miss Kim suspected Kong might still be awake. After ringing the doorbell and calling out several times without response, she tried the door and was surprised to find it unlocked. What awaited inside was horrifying. Kong's body lay face down in a pool of blood in the living room, her skin already turning purple. The crime scene was brutal, with fatal wounds scattered across the victim's body, to stab wounds to the face, to the neck, and a particularly savage 28 wounds to the chest and abdomen. Another 39 wounds were found on her thighs and calves. The attack was so violent that one stab to the left side of her face had enough force to break off her lower fourth tooth. Given the brutality of the crime and the strength evident in the wounds, investigators initially suspected the perpetrator was likely a physically strong male. At the crime scene, investigators discovered an open bedroom window. On the floor next to the bed, a series of size 8 US bloody shoe prints were clearly visible, even marking the mattress. Testing confirmed this was the victim's blood. These bloody footprints created a winding path through the bedroom before forming a straight line, leading to the front door. The apartment layout was clear from the crime scene diagram. The front door opened into the living room, while the bedroom where the initial attack occurred was in the upper left corner. Based on the open window and blood patterns on the bed, police reconstructed the sequence. The killer had entered through the window and surprised the victim while she was resting. In panic, Kong tried to escape, opening the bedroom door and running to the living room where she was ultimately killed. The perpetrator then fled through the front door. Initially, police noticed signs of what appeared to be a typical robbery. Drawers and closets in the bedroom were disturbed, and cash was missing from the victim's wallet. However, upon closer inspection, they found several inconsistencies in the ransacking. While drawers were pulled out and contents disturbed, it seemed the perpetrator had only made a cursory attempt. Most clothes remained neatly folded in the closet, with just a few items carelessly thrown on the floor. More suspiciously, while cash was taken from the wallet, valuable items like savings books, the wallet itself, and additional cash in a drawer remained untouched. The victim's jewelry was still on her body. These contradictions at the crime scene convinced investigators this was likely a poorly staged robbery. The killer had taken only a small amount of money to mislead the investigation. Notably, the killer's straight path when leaving the scene and complete disregard for living room cabinets painted a clear picture. The perpetrator had deliberately climbed through the bedroom. The window went straight for the victim, then only superficially searched before escaping. From these details, police theorized this was a murder disguised as a robbery. The shocking number of stab wounds, 39 in total, suggested the killer had acted in extreme rage or emotional agitation. This indicated the perpetrator likely knew the victim and possibly had deep-seated conflicts with her. However, the investigation was hampered by the absence of fingerprints or DNA evidence, like hair or blood from the killer at the scene. Additionally, in 2008, there were no security cameras in the area around the apartment, making the search for the perpetrator even more challenging. Through interviews with those close to the victim, investigators pieced together a picture of Kong's life. She was a divorced woman who had been living in the apartment for several years. Her son, Kim Jang-jun, aged 20, was a college student who had previously lived with her before moving to a new place closer to his university and part-time job. Of particular interest was Kong's relationship with her 45-year-old boyfriend, Mr. Lee. While La frequently stayed overnight at the apartment, neighbors reported their relationship was far from peaceful. Intense arguments were common, primarily stemming from Lee's excessive jealousy. A crucial detail emerged when neighbors recalled hearing screams from Kong's apartment around 5 a.m. on June 7th. However, being so accustomed to the couple's arguments, they had drowsily ignored it. When cross-referenced with the forensic results, police confirmed this was the time of death. approximately 2.5 days before the body was discovered. These clues quickly made Lee the primary suspect. Police met with Kong's son Kim, who was living in a rented room about 2 miles away. Upon learning of his mother's murder, Kim was devastated. She was his only remaining family member, as his parents had divorced 7 years earlier, and his father had died in a traffic accident. When asked about Lee, Kim confirmed his mother's romantic relationship and revealed the frequent conflicts caused by Lee's unfounded jealousy. During the investigation into Kong's relationships, Aonis consistently reported Lee's controlling behavior, such as monitoring her work hours, checking her phone, and blocking numbers of people he suspected. Phone records showed Lee frequently called Kong but abruptly stopped contact a few days before the murder. These clues made Lee increasingly suspicious in the investigators' eyes. However, during the investigation, a new detail emerged that complicated the case. About a year before her death, Kong had purchased a total of 13 life insurance policies with monthly premiums totaling approximately $1,500, a significant sum given her financial situation, forcing her to work multiple jobs to cover the payments. The policies would pay out about $250,000 upon her death, with her only son Kim as the sole beneficiary. While it's common for children to be beneficiaries of their parents' life insurance, the unusual number of policies and the substantial payout made investigators consider the possibility that Kim might be involved in his mother's death. Therefore, the primary focus became verifying both Kim's and Lee's whereabouts at the time of the murder. During questioning, Kim stated that from the evening of June 6th until the following afternoon, he had been in his rented apartment hosting a drinking party with 3 friends. All 3 friends confirmed this alibi, and despite repeated questioning, their statements remained perfectly consistent. When asked about his mother's insurance policies, Kim appeared completely surprised and insisted he knew nothing about them. As investigators delved deeper into the mother and son's past, they uncovered a tragic story. Kong had given birth to Kim when she was 22, then had to raise him alone while her husband worked away and rarely sent money home. Although Kong tried every possible job to provide for her son, fate wasn't kind to them. When Kim was 8, a series of misfortunes struck. Economic hardship and Kong's serious illness that required frequent treatment prevented her from working. Finally, with only social welfare to her on, she made the heartbreaking decision to place her son in an orphanage only, able to visit occasionally. It wasn't until 15 years later, when her health improved and she found stable employment, that Kong was finally able to bring her son home. The mother and son lived together for 2 years before Kim moved out after finding a job. Investigators believed that those 15 years of separation had left Kong with deep guilt and a desire to compensate her son. The multiple life insurance policies with Kim as beneficiary might have been her way of ensuring her son's future in case anything happened to her. Kong's friends reported that she often expressed regret about her son, particularly about the material and emotional hardships he endured during childhood. She constantly felt guilty about not being able to provide adequately for Kim, and often confided in friends about her fear of not being able to care for him if something happened to her. She viewed the insurance policies as a way to secure Kim's future. To afford the substantial insurance premiums, Kong worked tirelessly. During the day, she sold cross-stitch embroidery at a craft store, then worked nights as a karaoke hostess. Despite this grueling schedule, she never forgot her responsibilities to her son. Even though Kim had income from his part-time job, Kong insisted on supporting him fully, covering his college tuition and most of his monthly living expenses. Given the substantial insurance payout potential, police couldn't ignore Kim as a suspect, despite how unlikely it seemed in the mother-son relationship. The investigation focused on 2 main suspects: Lee, the jealous boyfriend, and Kim, the only son and beneficiary of the insurance policies. However, Lee was quickly eliminated as a suspect when security cameras clearly showed him returning home on the evening of June 6th and not leaving until the next morning. Additionally, an important detail from the crime scene further cleared both suspects. The bloody footprints were size 8s, while both Lee and Kim were size 9.5. The investigation had reached a dead end until a new clue emerged: a small blood stain found near the front door handle. Significantly, this blood wasn't the victim's and appeared fresh, suggesting the killer had been injured during the attack. Testing revealed it was type O blood, which didn't match either Lee's or Kim's blood type. This discovery once again confirmed that neither primary suspect was the killer. At this point, with Lee's alibi solidly confirmed by security footage only, Kim's alibi, supported by 3 friends, could potentially have discrepancies due to human factors. Police therefore scrutinized the testimonies of the 3 friends, who were allegedly with Kim on the night of the murder, more closely. Upon further investigation, police discovered all 3 had grown up together in the same orphanage and were very close. Suspecting possible collusion between close friends, police changed their interrogation strategy. They separated each person and asked more detailed probing questions. This tactic proved effective when one of them began to waver. He admitted to arriving late due to work commitments, and when pressed further, he became evasive and reluctant to continue the interrogation. This unusual reaction only heightened police suspicions about the truthfulness of their initial statements. Under intense questioning, this friend finally revealed A crucial detail that night, there weren't just 4 of them at Kim's apartment, there was a 5th person named Cho Kyung. Hanan Kim had instructed his friends to maintain their story if questioned by police, but absolutely not to mention Cho. This was clearly suspicious. Why would all 5 people spend the evening together, but deliberately exclude Cho from their statements? Further investigation revealed that Cho was quite close to Kim, and for a time when Kim still lived with his mother, Cho had stayed at Kong's home when he had nowhere else to go. Suspiciously, immediately after the murder, Cho had turned off his phone and disappeared. Through security camera footage, they discovered he had taken a bus to Gunsan in North Jeolla province the day after the murder. Since Cho also knew Kim from the orphanage, police investigated there and discovered a crucial detail. Cho's blood type was O, matching the unknown blood found at the crime scene. Additionally, during questioning, one friend revealed that when using the bathroom at Kim's house the day after the murder, he had discovered a bloody bandage in the corner. This evidence supported the theory that Cho was injured during the murder and had used the bandage to treat his wound. With these clues, police launched a manhunt for Cho, who had vanished from his residence and was now the prime suspect. Understanding that those who grew up in orphanages often maintained special bonds with each other, investigators contacted all of Cho's old friends from the orphanage. This logic was based on a simple fact: without parents or relatives, Cho would likely turn to his closest friends for help. This strategy quickly paid off when one of Cho's friends informed police of his whereabouts. The manhunt ended on June 26, 2008, when police arrested Cho at a public phone booth several miles from downtown Gunsan. Surprisingly, when cornered, the 19-year-old made no attempt to resist. Instead, he immediately confessed to killing Kong, the mother of Kim, whom he considered his closest friend. However, the most shocking revelation came during subsequent interrogations. Cho provided testimony that completely reversed the course of the investigation. Kim, the son who appeared devastated by his mother's death, was actually the mastermind behind the murder. Furthermore, Cho revealed that Kim knew very well about the life insurance policies his mother had purchased. This testimony proved Kim had lied, because how could an outsider like Cho know about Kong's insurance policies, while Kim, her own son, claimed ignorance? Kim must have told Cho, contradicting his earlier statement to police that he knew nothing about the insurance policies. During interrogation, Cho revealed a cruel plan born from Kim's greed. Tired of their modest life, Kim proposed a horrific solution to Cho. "How long must we live in poverty? Like this, if we just kill my mother, the insurance money will be enough for us to live comfortably. I'll share a portion of the money with you if you help me." Blinded by the enormous insurance payout of $250,000. Kim repeatedly discussed this plan with Cho, painting pictures of the luxurious life that awaited them. Eventually, Cho agreed to participate in this horrific conspiracy. On the night of June 6th, after letting their 3 friends fall into a drunken sleep, Kim and Cho quietly left the rental apartment and went to Miss Kong's home. Kim had prepared a small folding ladder to break in through the second-floor side window. Knowing that the sliding door had no latch, no bars, and could never be properly locked. After Kim climbed into the house, he opened the door from inside to let Cho in, then climbed back down to wait in the car. Around 5 a.m. when Kang was returning home from work, Kim sat in the car watching his mother walking across the front yard toward the building. He immediately called Cho to signal that his mother was about to enter, instructing him to hide carefully in the bedroom, wait for Kong to enter, then strike, ensuring she couldn't escape, and call for help. Kim emphasized that Cho must complete the plan at all costs. While Cho was killing Miss Kong inside, Kim hurriedly left the car and stood guard at the apartment's main entrance, intending to prevent his mother from escaping and ready to assist Cho if needed to ensure his mother's death. After the murder, Cho and Kim stayed the scene to look like a robbery, taking money from Kong's wallet. During the struggle, Cho's hand was injured and cut. After the murder, he tried to erase all traces, wiping clean fingerprints and blood at the scene. Before dawn, they drove to a nearby mountain to dispose of the murder weapons, including the knife, gloves, and clothes, then returned to Kim's apartment and went to bed as if they had been there all night. The 3 friends unknowingly became alibis. For Kim, Cho's revelations completely reversed the case. Kim was no longer just an accomplice, but emerged as the mastermind who planned his own mother's murder. In subsequent interrogations, Cho revealed a notable backstory. When he turned 18 and left the orphanage, Kim had suggested to his mother that Cho live with their family. This proposal stemmed from their special bond formed during their childhood at the orphanage. Initially, Miss Kong agreed to her son's wish, partly wanting to compensate for her son's past, and partly wanting to help a young man from the orphanage who had experienced trauma. However, Cho was already 18 to 19 years old, but unemployed, which created significant financial pressure on Miss Kong, who was supporting her son through college. After a few months, she found Cho a job at a nearby restaurant that included room and board to reduce her living expenses. In his distorted mind, Cho interpreted this as Kong's subtle way of pushing him out of the house. This resentment simmered within Cho, and when Kim proposed the plan to kill his mother for insurance money, he quickly agreed to help, driven both by greed and revenge. Based on Cho's confession, police immediately arrested Kim at his rental apartment in Anyang. However, even faced with solid evidence and his accomplice's detailed testimony, Kim stubbornly denied all accusations. Furthermore, he cleverly exploited his circumstances to gain sympathy from the online community. Kim crafted an image of himself as a sympathetic figure, someone who had overcome adversity from the orphanage, studied diligently, and was now being falsely accused of the horrific crime of killing his own mother. Despite Kim's attempts to deny his guilt, the evidence against him became increasingly compelling. Investigators found Kim's car rental records from a self-drive rental shop, along with a gas station transaction made at 1:20 a.m. on June 7th, precisely when Kim claimed he was sleeping at home. These transactions were undeniable as they were clearly recorded on his credit card statements. Another crucial piece of evidence was Kim's fingerprints found on the second-floor window, perfectly matching Cho's testimony about how Kim had climbed through the window to let Cho in. While finding Kim's fingerprints in his mother's house would normally be unremarkable, the critical detail was the direction of the prints. If someone had placed their hand on the windowsill from inside the house, the fingerprints would point outward, but these prints pointed inward from the outside. This detail confirmed Cho's testimony about Kim climbing through the window. Police theorized that Kim had removed his gloves to better grip the stiff sliding door, which had become difficult to open over time. While cleaning up afterward, he had only wiped the glass portion of the window, forgetting about the prints on the windowsill. With an array of irrefutable evidence from credit card transactions for car rental and gas, fingerprints on the windowsill indicating entry from outside, to Cho's detailed testimony, Kim had to face trial despite his persistent denials. After the media coverage, some observant internet users noticed odd expressions on Henry Chow's face. His eyes seemed to avoid direct contact at times, as if he was hesitant to look straight. He even smiled during the interview, giving the impression that he wasn't genuinely worried about his disappearance. Consequently, some ninis boldly speculated that the elderly couple hadn't vanished, but may have been murdered by their son Henry Chow. In fact, Hong Kong police had long suspected Henry Chow. According to his statement, his parents went missing after having tea with him on March 2nd. However, when police reviewed all the surveillance footage from Langham Place Mall, neither Henry Chow nor his parents appeared there on that day. The family lived in a residential area in a neighbor mentioned seeing the parents leave home on March 1st, but they hadn't returned since. This matched the account from the older brother Hoing. On the morning of March 1st, Hoing had left for work early and said goodbye to his parents before leaving. However, when he returned home that evening, they were nowhere to be found. At the time, Chia Hoing asked his younger brother Henry Chow where their parents had gone. Henry explained that their parents went out that afternoon for tea with friends to reminisce. Hoing thought that since his parents were now enjoying their retirement years and financially independent, they could freely travel or meet with friends. So he didn't think much of it and calmly waited for them to return. On March 2nd, 2013, Hoing still had seen his parents after returning from work. This made him wonder if something had happened to them. He decided to call the police for assistance, but was stopped by his younger brother Henry Chow, who had just returned home. Henry told him that their parents said they were going to mainland China for 2 days and were in a hurry, so they asked him to inform Hoing later. Hoing felt that his brother's explanation didn't make sense. Although their parents loved to travel, they always made arrangements in advance, especially notifying both sons of their plans. This situation had never happened before. While Hoang still had his doubts, his brother had tried to reassure him about their parents' well-being, so he didn't press further and decided to wait patiently for their return. 5 days later, on March 7, 2013, with no sign of their parents' return and unable to reach them by phone, Hoang and his brother's search efforts had been fruitless. Finally, he decided to go to the police station with his brother to report their disappearance. From the information in the report, there were numerous suspicious signs suggesting that if Glory Chow and Muno hadn't encountered trouble outside, it was highly likely that the youngest son Henry Chow had been lying all along. Subsequently, the police added Henry Chow to their list of suspects for a more detailed investigation. 1 week after receiving the report, on March 14, 2013, members of the crime unit began following leads to investigate Henry Chow. During questioning, Henry continued to insist that his parents had gone to mainland China. However, the police quickly noticed something was off. While recounting the events, Henry Chow appeared visibly uneasy, his gaze shifting around, and he frequently drank water to relieve tension. At that point, the police knew Henry Chow was lying about his parents' whereabouts. He was now their prime suspect. But they still needed additional evidence to prove his involvement in his parents' disappearance. That night, the police received a phone call that would mark a major turning point in the investigation. The caller, claiming to know Henry Chow through an online game, informed the police that around 7:00 p.m., Henry had shared with the group, "My parents aren't missing, I killed them." Henry reportedly confessed, saying, "I am a psychopath since childhood. I've had emotions that ordinary people don't experience. I lack empathy and cannot feel others' pain. I resent my parents deeply and no longer wanted them to live in this world." In addition to this, the police received several similar reports. One of Henry Chow's real-life friends told the police that, on the afternoon his parents disappeared, Henry confessed to him about killing his parents. The friend then asked, "Does your brother Hoang know about this?" Henry replied, "I don't want to scare others, and my brother might end up losing 3 family members at once. Our parents and his brother." Henry Chow's cousin Koi Noon also reported to the police that Henry had told her about killing his parents. He even mentioned that he intended to get rid of his brother Hoang as well. On March 7th, Koo Noon received a call from Hoang and learned about the disappearance of her uncle and aunt. On March 11th, Koo Anon and her parents went to visit the Chow brothers to discuss ways to search for their missing parents. At that time, Henry Chow showed no unusual behavior and didn't seem worried about his parents' disappearance. Afterward, they split into groups to search for the missing parents. Henry Chow even asked his cousin Koo Anon to check the recent activity on his parents' credit cards. On March 14th, Henry unexpectedly sent a message to Koo Anon saying, "I have something personal to tell you, and I want to meet you. If I don't meet with you, I fear I'll never have the chance to share the truth." In the message, he also mentioned, "You make me feel connected to the world, and don't make me hate it." After reading her cousin's message, Koo Anon thought something might have happened to him, so she immediately agreed to meet, because Henry Chow had to respond to police questioning about his parents' disappearance that afternoon. He postponed their meeting with his cousin until midnight at Tauk Sui. That night, Koo Anon arrived at meeting place early, but Henry was late. As soon as he sat down, he asked Koo Anon, who worked at a church, "Does Christ forgive?" During the conversation, Henry Chow revealed, "Since childhood, I never liked my parents. I felt they placed too many expectations on me, which put immense pressure on me. Because I couldn't meet those expectations, that's why I planned to disappear from this world before I turned 30, but I changed my mind after meeting my soulmate." While confiding in Koo Anon, Henry emphasized, "I am a psychopath and can't feel others' pain. My parents often beat and scolded me, and my brother sometimes bullied me too. So I planned to kill my parents first, then my brother. However, after my parents disappeared, I felt the affection my brother had for me, so I changed my mind and decided not to harm him." Henry also disclosed to Koo Anon, "A and I share similar experiences, the same thoughts, and we both understand each other's emotions." The murder plan had been prepared months in advance. He then recounted in detail to Seo Anon the time and place where he killed his parents, as well as where he disposed of their body parts. He initially wrapped the body parts in garbage bags and threw them into the sea. However, realizing that the bags would float, he decided to cook the parts into barbecued pork rice dishes and discard them as food waste. Henry Chow also told Kuai-nin that after committing the crime, he had to go to the hospital for treatment due to an injury. He had to get 7 stitches in his left leg, which delayed his plan to dispose of his parents' bodies. At the end of their conversation, Henry Chow told her, "I really can't bring myself to tell my brother the full truth. So if you ever have the chance, please tell him for me." Kui-nun was shocked by what Henry Chow had shared. She couldn't believe or understand how her cousin could commit such a cruel and horrific act. Henry Chow's attitude as he recounted the story left Kui-in deeply disappointed. As he described how he killed his parents, he seemed disturbingly proud. He even boasted that no one noticed him and no one smelled anything when he disposed of the bodies. Henry Chow appeared to feel very pleased with his achievement and showed no remorse at all. On March 15, 2013, after receiving a report from Kuai-nin, the police arrived at a residential building in the Western District at 7 a.m. the next day to arrest Henry Chow on suspicion of obstructing a lawful burial. Under police questioning, Henry Chow finally admitted the truth: "I killed my parents." He also revealed the crime scene location and identified his accomplice. Based on Henry Chow's information, at around 10:30 a.m., the police arrived at Hoing building located at 32 to 44 Fukchuk Street in Tauk Sui. On the 3rd floor they found Henry Chow's accomplice Angus Se Chen K35, nicknamed A as Henry had previously mentioned. The police arrested Angus Se Chen K on suspicion of obstructing a lawful burial. When the police opened the door to the 3rd floor apartment, they were hit by a strong stench mixed with the smell of bleach and air conditioning. Let's take a look at the layout of the apartment. Upon entering, there was a long hallway to the right where the kitchen and bathroom. Continuing down the hall, there was a storage room on the right which contained 2 refrigerators, 2 microwaves, and some miscellaneous items. At the end of the hall was the living room, with 2 bedrooms facing the living area. In the corner of the 2nd bedroom in the living room, the police found numerous bottles of bleach buckets, a cement trolley, rice cookers, plastic wrap, and over 600 foam containers. The scene resembled a food processing workshop. Under the bed, in the master bedroom, police found a handwritten murder plan by Henry Chow, detailing his plan to kill his parents. He had also intended to store the bags containing body parts in the refrigerator in the 2nd bedroom. On a blood-stained table, they found a brand new cutting board with some minced meat on it. Beneath the table was a severed arm, a knife, and a saw were also found in a red plastic bucket next to the table. There were 2 refrigerators in the storage room between the bathroom and the 2nd bedroom. The refrigerator doors were covered with a layer of clear plastic wrap, and a light red liquid was seeping along the edges of the wrap. A severed head was found on top of the 2 refrigerators, along with foam meal containers filled with cooked meat and organs wrapped in plastic bags. Also found in the room were 3 large plastic bins and tools used for the crime, including a total of 7 sharp knives, 1 kitchen knife, 2 cleavers, 4 new knives, a hacksaw, and 2 saw blades, one of which was broken in half. At the scene, the police discovered the decomposing bodies of 2 individuals identified as Henry Chow's parents. He had murdered them and carried out all these acts against his own parents. He wrapped them in plastic bags and foam containers, then stored them in the refrigerators and large plastic bins. This method was extremely cruel and heartless. Finally, the truth behind the case began to surface. The perpetrator, 29-year-old Henry Chow, came from a family of 4. He was unemployed, enjoyed stock speculation, and relied on luck-based activities for his livelihood. Henry's parents had raised him with care since he was young. They spared no expense, even paying for his piano lessons, until he reached a professional level. Although Henry was quite skilled at playing the piano, he didn't like it at all. His academic performance in school was also average, so his parents sent him to Australia for higher education, hoping to improve his prospects. While studying in Australia, Henry often faced discrimination because of his short stature. He was even pushed to the ground and beaten at times. This experience of mistreatment during his studies left a significant scar on his life, though he never discussed it with his family. In 2003, at the age of 19, Henry Chow returned to Hong Kong, but his personality had changed considerably. He was no longer the well-behaved, polite, and respectful child he once was. After his return, he frequently argued with his parents. Henry stated, "My parents put immense pressure on me. They forced me to learn piano from a young age and wouldn't let me pursue activities I enjoyed every time I needed to study for exams. My dad would either be at home watching soccer or playing piano, and all that noise made it impossible for me to concentrate on my studies." Henry had long harbored resentment toward his parents. He believed they deprived him of the chance to play sports as a child, which he blamed for his short stature. Henry once confided in friends, saying, "I've been through many failed relationships. One woman even had my child and gave birth to a daughter, but after the baby was born, both mother and child disappeared, and I could never find them." Frustrated by his failed relationships, he felt that his short stature was the reason all his girlfriends left him. Henry blamed his parents for his career and romantic struggles, believing they were at the root of all his problems. After returning to Hong Kong from Australia, Henry Chow tried various jobs, such as working at a bank and in a real estate company, but he couldn't succeed in any of them. He constantly felt that his bosses were picking on him, or that his co-workers were bullying him. Over time, he quit working and stayed at home, spending his days doing nothing but indulging in a careless lifestyle. At home, Henry Chow turned to unhealthy habits, seeking satisfaction in the virtual world. He even recorded explicit videos of himself and uploaded them online to attract customers. In these videos, he introduced himself in English and demonstrated his skill of drawing circles freehand. Henry often dreamed of becoming wealthy, so he invested heavily in stocks, hoping to strike it rich overnight. However, he consistently lost money, and his parents had to bail him out multiple times. Once his parents even sold a house to help pay off his debts. After paying off everything, the remaining money was divided between the two brothers, with each receiving 500,000 Hong Kong dollars, about $64,000. But as soon as Henry Chow received his share, he went back to investing in the stock market. By 2013, Henry had once again lost a large sum of money. He asked his parents to pay off his debts and pleaded with them to sell their assets and divide the proceeds among their children. Disappointed by their son's repeat failures, his parents refused and insisted that he should work to pay off his debts himself. Additionally, they feared he might sell the property under his name at a low price to clear his debts, so they asked him to transfer the ownership of the house to his brother Chia Hoing. Henry Chow didn't understand his parents' intentions. He felt they were taking everything that belonged to him. Losing the house was a severe blow to him, leaving him in utter despair. Henry confided in his friend Angus Say about his desperate thoughts. Unexpectedly, after hearing his story, Angus responded, "This is all your parents' fault. You're in this situation because of them. The ones who should die are your parents, not you." Angus Say then persuaded Henry to abandon his initial plan and instead suggested that he take action against his parents. Henry claimed that Angus told him. Tempted by Angus Say's encouragement, Henry ultimately gave in. The two began discussing how they could kill his parents without making any noise. On February 27, 2013, 2 days before the incident's supermarket, surveillance cameras captured Henry Chow and Angus Say buying several knives. In the footage, Angus Say is seen paying for the items at the checkout counter, while Henry Chow stood at a distance, watching carefully and cautiously. On the day of the crime, March 1, 2013, Henry Chow and Angus Say had prepared all the tools needed to commit the act. Henry told his parents, "I'm planning to move out and rent an apartment with a friend at Hoing Building in Tai Kok Sui. I'd like you to come help me move my things." His parents felt relieved and happy, glad to see that their son was making positive changes. At 11:19 a.m. that day, prompted by their son's sincere request, the couple arrived at Hoing Building. 20 minutes later, Henry Chow was seen with his parents outside the building's elevator. Surveillance footage captured the three of them entering the elevator and going to an apartment on the 3rd floor at 11:40 a.m. As Henry opened the door, his mother Munio entered first, followed by her husband and son. However, before she could even see her son's new place, she was ambushed by a man hiding behind the door. As they entered the apartment, Angus Say suddenly jumped out from behind the door and attacked Muno from behind. He stabbed her in the neck, with a knife, then struck multiple times in her abdomen and back, killing her instantly before she could react. At that moment, her husband Glory Chow realized something was terribly wrong. Witnessing the brutal murder of his wife, he tried to escape with his son, only to find Henry standing in front of him with a menacing expression. Henry Chow attempted to attack his father with a knife, but Glory Chow was prepared. Henry, standing at 5 feet 5 in, was no match for his father. The two were locked in a struggle. Just then, Angus intervened, holding Glory down. Glory used all his strength to fight back, but was ultimately overpowered. He was stabbed multiple times in the back, thrown forcefully to the ground, and even strangled by Angus. The entire incident happened very quickly. During the struggle, Henry Chow accidentally injured his leg, so he left the apartment alone to seek medical treatment at a hospital. At 4:19 p.m., hospital surveillance cameras captured his appearance. At 4:39 p.m., he was seen in a nearby clothing store purchasing a pair of pants to replace his blood-stained ones. Afterward, he returned to the scene. When he got back, he saw Angus dismembering the bodies and wrapping certain body parts in plastic bags. The two men then drove to the beach and threw part of the remains into the sea. Later, Henry Chow falsely reported that his parents had disappeared during a trip, until he was eventually arrested by the police. The accomplice, Angus, aged 35 and 6 years older than Henry Chow, came from an ordinary family. He was the second child with an older sister. Angus' father was from Mao. When Angus was 3, his mother discovered her husband's infidelity, leading to their divorce. After the divorce, his mother worked multiple jobs, sometimes 2 at a time, to support her 2 children. With her busy work schedule, Angus' care fell to his sister A, who was 2 years older. From a young age, Angus struggled academically, falling behind his classmates. He had to change schools repeatedly. Beyond academic troubles, he was often bullied at school, even physically assaulted, and sprayed with insecticide by some classmates. Yet he endured it all in silence, without retaliation. After high school, Angus started working various jobs, such as an accountant, secretary, and security guard, but none lasted long. He had no dating experience, and his love life and career were both unstable. In 2008, while working in New Zealand, he started dating a woman who turned out to be manipulative, leaving him in debt. Heartbroken, he returned to Hong Kong and, in despair over the breakup, attempted suicide by consuming rat poison and mercury. Fortunately, his sister discovered him in time, but the attempt left lingering effects. His intelligence and memory suffered, and he frequently experienced memory lapses. A few years later, Angus met an Indonesian woman through a friend and they got married. However, he soon discovered that his wife had only married him to gain residency in Hong Kong. She had a husband back in Indonesia and even a boyfriend. Angus wasn't even considered a part of her life. At his lowest, he met Henry Chow. The two met at a job interview and became close friends. Angus trusted Henry deeply, feeling that he treated him well by frequently taking him out for food and entertainment. After their arrest, however, Angus gave a completely different confession than Henry Chow. He claimed, "I had nothing to do with the crime on the day of incident. I came back home very late when I returned. I found Henry Chow murdering his family members. I was terrified and wanted to leave, but Henry Chow threatened me by bringing up my mother and sister, forcing me to help him dispose of the bodies. I had no choice but to follow Henry Chow's instructions." On August 4th, 6 months after the incident, the case went to trial at the Hong Kong High Court. The defendants, Henry Chow and Angus Sai, faced charges of murder and obstructing a lawful burial. In court, a jury of 7 members was present. However, during the trial, on August 7, 2014, one juror requested to withdraw, citing psychological distress from the nature of the case, reducing the jury to 6. Shortly after, another juror also filed to withdraw, stating that the details of the case were deeply disturbing. Judge C. Min Min announced the jury would proceed with 5 members. On August 13, 2014, a new jury was selected and a new trial date was set. 2 years after the crime, on February 23, 2015, the case reopened at the Hong Kong High Court, this time with a jury of 9. In the opening statement, the pros described the case's sequence of events. The victims' bodies had been dismembered, salted, frozen and microwaved, making it difficult for forensic experts to determine the exact time of death. According to Henry Chow's testimony, it was Angus Tsai who suggested these actions. Henry Chow's defense attorney called two psychiatrists to testify. One psychiatrist believed that Henry Chow's varied behaviors indicated he suffered from obsessive compulsive disorder and bipolar disorder stemming from his academic struggles, introverted personality, rejection by women, and unemployment. Psychological consultants from the Mental Health Center conducted IQ tests on both defendants. Henry Chow's IQ was found to be high at 126, while Angus Tsai's IQ was 84. Given these results, it was argued that Henry Chow with a higher IQ might have manipulated or implicated Angus Tsai in the murder. On March 23, 2015, after a month-long trial, the jury deliberated and delivered their final verdict. Henry Chow was found guilty by a vote of 8-1, while Angus Tsai was acquitted of murder by a unanimous vote of 9-0. However, Angus Tsai was convicted of obstructing a lawful burial. The court sentenced Henry Chow to life imprisonment for 2 counts of murder. Angus Tsai, though acquitted of murder, was sentenced to 1 year in prison for obstructing a lawful burial. Since Angus Tsai had already been in custody awaiting trial for nearly 2 years, he was released immediately. The case sent shockwaves through Hong Kong. Judge C. Mim remarked that Henry Chow was an exceptionally dangerous criminal and highly skilled at deception. In 2022, the film The Sparring Partner based on this case was released, bringing the case back into the public eye and making it more notorious than ever. To this day, there are still varying opinions about the truth behind the entire case. Some believe that Angus Tsai should be held accountable as he was involved in the murder process, while others think Henry Chow was the sole killer. Perhaps only the two of them truly know the full truth. As you can see, raising children with a liberal approach is quite rare in Hong Kong, as it's often seen as neglectful in Chinese culture. Traditional parenting is typically strict and closely monitored. Supporters of strict parenting believe that parents shouldn't deny or pretend that a child's performance doesn't matter. They argue that consistently setting high expectations can motivate children to improve. While this may be true, the perfectionist approach many Chinese parents take in raising their children can sometimes push a child to the edge. Conclusion: as the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me. Hear true crime stories. Remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you. For